Our subscribers get it, with exclusive access to breaking news, briefs, reactions, opinion, and process. iPolitics. Are you up for it?
Hi, welcome back. I'm James Baxter, founding editor of iPolitics. I'm joined on our political panel by, on my far left, Keith Beardsley of True North Public Affairs, sorry about that, Susan Smith from Blue Sky Strategies, and Robin McLaughlin of Summa Strategies. A lot of strategies in this group.
Very strategic.
Very strategic group. In the earlier segment, we talked a little bit about the new Canada-Europe trade agreement that was announced today. We focused mostly on the throne speech, but clearly, it was a second, to use the football analogy, a second first down for the Conservatives in back-to-back. They get a little bit of momentum kick, one would think, by signing the first major trade agreement in almost 20 years. I want to look at it from the opposition standpoint. Obviously, the Conservatives knew what they were doing by bringing it out this week, making it the agenda setter for the coming session. But obviously, for different reasons, probably the opposition parties are going to get excited about this, and some of the provinces, I assume, will get excited about it as well. Robin, what is the raw meat in this for the NDP to dig their teeth into? I'm assuming there are labor issues. I'm assuming there are farmer issues. Where do you see the opportunity?
Well, right now there isn't any raw meat. We don't know the details, unfortunately. We certainly know what's been talked about, and there's a lot in the media about the areas that were sticking points. Agriculture, of course. Some interesting requirements in there on the auto sector for Canada to gain access to the European market, something very important in Ontario. From a framing perspective here too, this is a government that actually, despite all it said, hasn't had that much luck on trade agreements. It's gone for volume with some signing trade agreements with very small countries that actually don't do much to expand our trade, and it's had problems with some of our biggest trade allies, namely the United States and now Brazil, who thinks we're constantly spying on them apparently for economic espionage. That's not helping the fact that those are the two biggest economies in our hemisphere. But this is also an NDP official opposition that is no longer the anti-trade NDP that the Conservatives want them to be. And I think the Conservatives very, very much hope the NDP will end up voting against this. And I'm sure in negotiations, very much looked at this from a political lens of, let's have a poison pill in there, or can we find a poison pill that will make the NDP unable to support this? There are issues in terms of support for dairy and cheese producers in Canada. That's been something they've been out vocal about. That's important politically in regions like Quebec and Ontario. So that'll be something that both the opposition parties will have to scrutinize carefully. But I can tell you this is going to be an agreement the NDP very much wants to sign. They very much want it to be positive because trade with Europe is very important. We currently have, unfortunately, a bad trade deficit with them, upwards of $14 billion. But that doesn't mean that it's not a very important. It's the biggest potential trading partner in the world for us.
I think Robin's going to have some I think the NDP are going to have some challenges, actually. I think overall, the agreement's been a long time coming. The Prime Minister really did need to do it. You made a football analogy. I mean, these were the dying minutes of the game as far as this trade agreement went in terms of getting it done, because the Europeans were about to move on to something else. It was taking so long to get it done, and there were so many sticking points. I think you'll definitely see Liberal support for the agreement. There will be the details as it, well, the detail, no, but I think you'll see it. I mean, the Liberals have always been in favor of trade and expanding our trade partnerships, most definitely. I think, back to my original point, you may have the NDP in Parliament who will be largely supportive of the agreement. What you'll find is the NDP on the ground, your traditional Labour members and so on, they may be the ones that are more vocal, and they may be the ones that end up putting Mr. Mulcair and his caucus in some awkward positions, because there's still the big chunk of the old NDP that doesn't really like trade agreements, and any kind of the rebrand is not yet complete. Not everybody's bought into all of that. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes up from the grassroots NDP side of things.
I think it's nice that the NDP and Liberals agree with what Harper's done. So I mean, that's the first time we've heard that in a long time. As far as Liberals supporting trade, they actually opposed NAFTA and all back through that, and then took credit for it later. But no, I think there's going to be something for every party in here. Every party has some part of their agenda which is going to be impacted by this particular agreement. So yes, there's going to be some support, hopefully all party support when it comes down to it. The NDP, I agree with Susan, I think the NDP are going to have the biggest problem because they have to shift their base. I mean, Mulcair is more center than where a lot of his party is, and he's going to have to deal with that, with whatever discontent comes up through there. He's also, when you look at the number of MPs coming out of Quebec, he has a major problem when it comes to supporting supply management and this type of thing. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. It's not just where the government's going to go. It's be, from my viewpoint, just as interesting watching what the opposition does and what happens to the opposition as they either support or pull back from supporting certain parts of this particular agreement. Auto trade, yes, there's lots in there for the auto industry, but how do the unions react? And as you mentioned, this is going to become an issue for Mulcair. The Liberals, it's less. I've been in the third party. I've been in the fifth party status. It's wonderful because you can say whatever you want.
Party of two. Yeah.
You can come up with ideas and you can support, not support. It really doesn't make any difference. It's the interaction between the government and the official opposition that's really key. So they're going to have to up their game. They're going to have their leader out, and he does a good job selling himself and selling the party. So they have tactics that may be quite different to what the official opposition will have.
In fairness, Keith, it's been a long time since the third party in the House is the most popular party
Yes,
in the country.
That's right. I was going to say,
There's a different dynamic
the leader of the Liberals, despite their third party status, has a little easier time than the leader of the opposition in getting some microphone time.
However, Robin, you were...
Celebrity is pretty powerful.
Celebrity is powerful.
But no, let's talk about, I think Keith touched on a challenge for Mr. Mulcair, and that is to continuing to erode the Conservative credentials as economic managers, because they've gotten away with this because of what? The rest of the G7 has been into disaster. So by default, we have looked very strong. But as other countries, such as the United States, other economies and European economies start to get stronger, that narrative's not going to look as good. So that is a challenge for Mulcair to continue to erode this narrative that this government is strong on trade, because they're not. Our trade deficit is massive now. It's much bigger than it was when the Conservatives came to power, and we sign agreements that actually grow our trade deficit. So trade is very much important. This is very much a pro-trade NDP. But that doesn't mean it's pro-conservative trade agreements, which have hurt both Canadian workers and Canadian economic sectors. The auto stuff, I think it's interesting that Keith mentioned, because one of the requirements that I've seen in that is that 55% of components of autos that are going to get shipped to Europe have to be all made in Canada. Now that does not compute well with the fact that we have a very integrated auto sector in North America. So I believe there is some requirement, or we have access to 100,000 autos to be shipped with, I think, 22%. So those are the kind of details that we don't know enough about yet to actually know if this is going to be good for those sectors.
Well, until the Americans sign their free trade agreement with Europe, it probably works in our favor because they'll ship more or build or do more building up in Canada. How much does regional politics play into this, do you think? I mean, obviously, you mentioned Quebec is probably going to be more on the negative side, what with the influx of cheese. But probably the Atlantic provinces will do well for transshipment purposes. Obviously, if Ontario's auto sector gets a boost, it'll be welcome. How do you think this obviously needs to get approval from the provinces as well? How do you think this is going to play out, Keith? Start.
That's the big question, because we really haven't seen much come out of the provinces up until today. I mean, we're going to see this over the next week to 2 weeks as more details come out and the provinces stake out their positions. I think Ontario sort of set the standard by saying immediately we want compensation for an area that's going to be hurt. We'll see the same come from Quebec and possibly any other province where they've got a problem with some minor aspect of the trade agreement. And if the feds go that route, and that's going to mute a lot of the discontent coming out of the Premier. So it just depends on how this plays out over the next 2 weeks.
I think the premiers have been largely apprised of what's going on along the way. I mean, the government knew that the provinces had to come on board for this deal to be done. I think one of the earlier sticking points involved something with Newfoundland and Premier Dunderdale, and I don't remember the exact file that was, but they have been involved. I don't think hopefully the federal government did not negotiate this in a vacuum so that it gets scuttled from the provinces. I think that if there's federal cash at play for some kind of compensation, those plays will definitely be made. I think at first blush, the most noise you will get is out of Quebec and the dairy, and Quebec and the dairy lobby, but there's a high concentration there, as you know. So it will be there. I don't think it will be the be-all and the end-all. I think our economy needs the growth that trade brings. I think each of the provinces need the continued growth that trade brings. For example, with Alberta, there's been the markets will open up for Alberta beef. those are the kinds of examples that the provinces need to help them boost their own bottom lines and boost their own economies.
Regional politics is important because regional economies are different. Of course, Ontario, having been the manufacturing heartland of Canada for some time, will be challenged here because this trade agreement, it looks like, will be hard for Canadian manufacturers. While there might be opportunities for certain sectors like the auto sector, in general, manufacturing will be hurt by increased flood of European goods. Quebec, of course, would be a sticking point, but I think Ontario as well. I think, as Keith pointed out, Ontario's already signaled that they're going to be seeking compensation. And the Atlantic provinces, I think this should be good for the seafood processing industry, and that was important. Susan rightly pointed to that one of the original sticking points was the inshore fishery, and the fact that Stephen Harper was looking to, and Europeans wanted, to abandon the kind of structural relationship between the smaller fishermen and how that works with processors. They didn't go that route because of protest from out east, we're really just going to have to see what the details show and which provinces kick up a fight.
Still with the provinces and fights.
There are a lot of those.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We're also one that kind of went a little bit underground over the summer, but is definitely just below the surface. Is the skills training, the jobs training policy. It's not selling with any of the provinces, it would seem. Coming back to the throne speech, there wasn't much mention of it. There wasn't much of an attempt to reintroduce it, resell it, make it something that people could get behind. You now load free trade on top of that if it creates winners and losers in the provinces. How fractured is that relationship and with the premiers and the provinces, and how in the next couple of years does it get better, Keith?
I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people think. I mean, I've watched where the premiers and the prime minister will have pretty good rock 'em down fight over a particular issue, then another issue comes along, we're bosom buddies because it benefits both of us. So these issues come up and they go down. I think when you mentioned the Canada job strategy, sure, right now they're upset with it. You've got a minister in there who's known for getting things done, who's known for basically making things work and getting agreements. So I think Jason's going to probably do quite well on that particular file if he can talk to his provincial counterparts, and if he can get them to see some logic in what he's doing and listen to them and take some of their issues and sort of bring it into the agreement, it's quite possible you will end up with some type of Canada job strategy. And if you talk to people in the industry, the actual people in the community colleges, they're excited about it. So how do you take their excitement and get that into the provincial governments and get Kenny to sort of work his magic, if you want, and try and get an agreement amongst all the provinces? It can happen, and at the federal, at the senior level between the premiers and the prime minister, a lot of this is political posturing. We all know that. I mean, we would get calls from some premiers often say, we're going out today to say this, this, and this about you. We have to. Okay, that's fine. And I'm not talking with the Harper government, I'm going all the way back.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, this happens. Everybody plays politics to their own people. But at the same time, everybody recognizes a certain degree of cooperation is necessary between the provincial governments and federal government for both sides to get something done. It's finding that happy medium which works for everybody.
I think it depends on the continuum of the issues that are on the table. And there's give and take all around. On the Canada Jobs Grant at this point in time, it still seems like a book report with a title page and nothing else underneath it. And I think Minister Kenny, as persuasive as a gentleman that he is, does have his hands full in trying to craft that into something that's actually workable, give it with the provinces, with the private sector, et cetera. There is an appetite for it from the community on the skills gap, but you have to put the words on paper before you can even cross the T's and dot the I's, and the words aren't there yet on that one. On the trade agreements, on the other fractious issues, I think broadly the economy is the bottom line. Even in Quebec, it's the bottom line, while Madame Marois would shine other things on there, as in the Quebec Charter, et cetera. But there's issues that the provinces and the feds have to get along. The Canada and Alberta and Canada and BC need to find solutions to pipelines. Canada needs the support of all of the provinces in selling Keystone. Things like that going forward. But the provinces they'll pick their spots, they'll pick their fights, and I think use it like poker chips and trade off for what they want to get what they want.
Robin, the jobs grant, it was a sort of interesting piece of politics in that I think by taking the money from the provinces and funneling it straight to to unions, but at the same time changing the rules of union cards and that sort of thing. They put the NDP. I think they thought they'd put the NDP in a very difficult position. In the end, the NDP really hasn't had to take a very an unusual stance on this because the provinces have stepped in and said no go. But where does first off where does the NDP sort of come down on the jobs grant? It does change the union dynamic. It does change the relationship with the provinces, and it's obviously for a leader like Mr. Mulcair, who comes out of the provincial background, it must be quite jarring.
Well, I think they come down on the side of the provinces and on the side of an approach. An approach should be consultative. Mr. Mulcair is committed to that when the NDP forms government, the NDP will hold annual First Ministers meetings and meetings with the provinces. And that's the same on everything, from healthcare to skills development to trade agreements. You need to have a consultative approach. And this government has done the opposite. On healthcare, it decided that it was going to gut money provided to the provinces and inform the provinces by just dropping it on their desks. And it's hard for Mr. Kenney, as persuasive as Susan points to he is, to sell something that amounts to taking money from them. And it's a non-starter with them. So I think actually it's been quite easy for the NDP to be on the side of the provinces and on the side of workers who aren't necessarily going to benefit from this, because it's not actually going to function. If you're going to see a jobs grant program, it's going to be a federal government likely going in alone. And I think that goes back to, as I said, the way this government's dealt with the provinces. And another issue that's been similar is on retirement savings. This is a government that thought it brought forward an innovative program in terms of voluntary workplace retirement savings plans that the provinces have no interest in going forward with. Where the government should be going forward on that is actually beefing up the Canada Pension Plan, the most stable pension plan that most Canadians will rely on for the bulk of their retirement income. And that's an area that even the Liberal government in Ontario is looking to move forward, as it takes some ideas out of Andrea Horvath's page there.
The one approach that's a little bit different that the government has taken is with regards to the securities regulator and cobbling together small coalitions, I guess, of people that agree with it. And it'll be interesting to see if they have to take that kind of piecemeal approach going forward on things like the job grant.
Great. Well, we'll take this opportunity to take another break, and we'll be back to get you all to gaze into your crystal balls and see where we're going to be in 6 months and a year's time. We'll be right back.